Hello, everyone. I would just like to introduce you to our next Jakarta Tech Talk here with Jared Anderson as he presents on Jakarta EE 9.1 and Open Liberty. If you have any questions for Jared as we move through today's presentation, feel free to ask in the chat or using the Ask a Question tab. And without any further delay, Jared, I will pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Jared Anderson. I am the WebSphere Jakarta EE development lead and the WebSphere performance team lead. So today I'll be talking about Liberty, Open Liberty, and WebSphere Liberty, and Jakarta EE 9, Jakarta EE 9.1, and what we've done to be compatible, how we got there, and how you can use that same sort of technology for yourself to be able to update your applications to run in a Jakarta EE 9 world. So first I have to use this particular note to tell you some information. It's not IBM confidential per se. This is from our Think deck, but I will be talking about some things that we potentially could talk about future of some of where we're going. None of that is guaranteed, so I always have to say that. We are subject to change at any time. And there was some discussion a little bit about performance here. All that is all done in a controlled environment. Your mileage may vary is the general caveat there, in your environment with your IO, with your hard drives, with your particular hardware may be different. So I have to say that every single time so that you understand that you may not get the same exact performance, but it should be something similar, hopefully. So general agenda today, we're going to talk about Liberty and Jakarta E9, but then I also want to do a code demo for you as well to kind of show you some of the things I'm talking about and how to do them. Okay, so initially, this is just to kind of level set where we came from a Jakarta EE9 perspective. 9.0 became live and announced back in December of last year. There was one platform that was certified at that time as compatible right when it came out back in December 2020. So that's, the time frame has been about 6 to 7 months since that announcement came out. So since that announcement, Liberty is also listed as a compatible implementation. So Open Liberty specifically. So when we did the 2102 beta for Open Liberty, that one was web profile compatible. There was a couple pieces left from the full platform that had not been completed yet. And so then the next beta after that, the 2103 beta, we marked that one as compatible. And so we were the first ones out there to be a vendor compatible implementation from a 9.0 perspective. There's a great little blog post I wrote about that. You can read about some more of the details there about that particular announcement. And then to give you where we went next, just last month, towards the end of the month, Jakarta EE 9.1 came out. The big thing from Jakarta 9.1 perspective is Java SE 11. Everything else is the same from the spec perspective, from API perspective. The only thing is updating the TCK to say that to work with Java SE 11 to add any of the dependencies that are missing. For instance, the orb is no longer in SE 11. Activation's not in there. JAXB is not in there, now called XML binding. There's a bunch of things that are not in the JDK anymore, so those need to be updated within the TCK to pull in those dependencies to be able to run it accordingly. You can see the announcement there from the Jakarta EE world, so just when that was released last month. But unlike 9.0, where there was only one implementation at release date, the Glassfish, there are multiple this particular release right at the release of the spec. And Open Liberty, again, is one of those. Again, a nice blog post there explaining about that particular, stating that we are compatible. But you also see Wildfly there. You'll see Managed Cat, Managed Fish there. You'll see Tommy E there. Tommy E, this is one of the first times that they have been marked compatible for quite a time because of some of the issues that they had with Java EE, but with Jakarta EE, they now are marked compatible, which we think is a great thing. The one thing to note here is that 2103 beta release that we did for 9.0 is the exact same release we did for 9.1. So even back in February at 2103 beta timeframe, We already were 9.1 compatible. We just didn't have a TCK to prove it. The reason for that is Liberty has supported Java 11 for over 2 years. And so all of our testing of any of the Jakarta EE technologies were already being tested on 8 and on 11 and on the current next, 14, 15, and soon to be 16 once we get through the testing on that. Okay, so how did we get there? How did we get Liberty to be compatible with Jakarta EE9 with all the adventures of Jakarta EE9? Thank you for having security updates right now. Obviously, we all know from Jakarta EE9, the big, huge change is it's EE8, but it's changing of the package names from Java X dot to Jakarta dot. It's changing of the namespaces for the deployment descriptors from jcp.org over to Jakarta.ee. Those type of changes that are mostly non-technical changes, non-API changes that require a bunch of work. So first, we worked with any of the open source communities that are out there that plan to have a Jakarta EE9 implementation of a function. So we're making sure that they get to a release level that will work with being TCK compatible, and bringing in that new version in order to support that particular function. But where there isn't an existing open source, or we're using our own internal implementation within Liberty, we didn't want to have to duplicate all the code and then just do those find replaces of Java X to Jakarta. So we wanted to be able to just transform the code, hopefully from a bytecode perspective. Obviously, we could do it from a source perspective, but we wanted to try and see if we can do it from a bytecode perspective. So to give an idea of how did we do that? So the way that we did that second option is we created a transformer project that initially was only an IBM, but we also made it available into the open with using an Eclipse open source project to take binary code, compiled code, not even having to have the source, and be able to transform to change import Java X dot to import Jakarta dot. Changing any class references. You can change string references. So if you have a class 4 name, for instance, and that has a Java X on it, it will also do the same thing. There's many different options. I will look to actually show you how some of that works in the code demo. Again, here you'll see a great blog post on that. That was written by Tom Batanti, one of the developers on the Eclipse Transformer. And I'll be referencing that later and showing you, going through some of the steps that are in that blog post to show you how to use it in your own application development, in transforming your applications and transforming your configuration of your servers when running with the Liberty environment. Other companies have picked up this technology. Again, I was putting it in the open to help accelerate their adoption of Jakarta EE9. Some of those same exact companies are the ones that you saw that are Jakarta EE9 compatible with the release of 9.1 using the same technology. Additionally, when we worked on Jakarta EE9, we also note that the short names of Jakarta features within the subspecs of Jakarta, the names have changed. So, it used to be that you would have a short name for a subspec called JPA or called JCA. Well, that's now been changed to persistence. It's been changed to connectors to remove that J part of the short name. So JPA is a registered trademark for the persistent specification that is registered to Oracle. With the move over to Jakarta into the Eclipse Jakarta environment, that registered trademark is no longer used as part of the short name of the spec. We took this opportunity in the Liberty for Liberty supporting Jakarta 9 to also update our short names for our Liberty feature names, where you can turn on a particular subspec within the product to also remove these short names and start using the Jakarta names. I mean, one of the advantages of they're a lot more descriptive. Connectors is a lot more descriptive than JCA. You have to know what JCA stands for. So there's a lot of benefit also doing it that way as well. We do have a few exceptions. We already had concurrent. We didn't change the concurrency, just making it easy for customer switching over there. And then authentication, authorization. Those are very generic names. There's a lot of authentication and authorization function that can be in a product that is above and beyond what's required by the specification. So we added the word app in front of it to specify that it is specifically for app authorization, app authentication when using Jakarta EE technologies. It's very similar to what we did for security. Again, security would be a very generic name. So app security is what we call the security spec feature that would be used with the security spec for Jakarta EE. So if you went and said, hey, let me do JCA, I'm switching over from 1.7 over to 2.0, just put JCA 2.0 in my server XML, it will actually detect that and say, hey, JCA is not the name anymore for 2.0. We'll tell you that it's connectors. It won't start your server, but will help point you to the right direction on what you need to do. Obviously, like I said, you can use transformer tooling to be able to do this, so you won't even have to do manually changing of your server configuration when moving over to Jakarta EE9 with a Liberty environment. Again, show you that in a little bit. Okay. Additionally, with Liberty support of Jakarta EE9, we took this opportunity to change to use a new JAX-RS, or as it's called now with Jakarta World, RESTful Web Services implementation. Previously, we used a Apache CXF implementation for JAX-RS 2.0 and 2.1. With the 3.0 implementation, we have switched over to use REST Easy instead of Apache CXF. The main reason for this is a performance perspective. So this also is part of my other hat, where it's a performance lead within WebSphere. We took a look in the performance team, WebSphere performance team, to see how does CXF compare with other implementations, JAX-RS implementations out there in the open source. And we determined that REST Easy did outperform CXF. So we took this opportunity with Jakarta EE9, where we have this big changeover, to make this transition to a new implementation. And so we've done some internal measurements of where we currently are with the implementations with, again, we're in a beta still for Open Liberty supporting Jakarta EE9. And the current measurements that we're seeing is a range from about 7 to 20, maybe a little more than 20% throughput improvement when using REST Easy instead of Apache CXF. So it's just comparing the same application, EE8 application, and then doing the same application as EE9. So just, again, the code's the same. All the difference is JavaX to Jakarta. And we saw this is throughput improvements. The reason for the range here, it depends upon that application. If that application is a more comprehensive application that does have JAX-RS API calls in it, but also has JSF and WebSockets and JMS, etc., you're going to see more of that lower percentage there because it's going to be diluted, because they're not going to see improvements in performance for those other specs besides JAX-RS. But if you're running an application, a simple application that is just doing REST work, the only thing it is doing is REST APIs, maybe going over to JPA to be able to do some work to get data from a database, you're going to see more closer to that, multiple double-digit percentage improvement, 12 to 20%. If database obviously causes more delays there, but if you're doing just raw call over to an API that does nothing except for hello world, you're going to see more of that 20-ish percentile throughput and benefits. So where do we go from here? So I have said multiple times that this is a beta release. Why is it currently the beta release? There is a lot of Open Liberty and WebSphere Liberty value-add features that depend upon Jakarta EE technologies. Those are not needed to work with Jakarta EE9 in order to have a compatible implementation of Jakarta EE9. So those ones currently don't work with Jakarta EE9, and we are doing the work to change those to support 7, 8, 9 versions of Java EE/Jakarta EE. Again, we're trying to keep that as simple as we can to have the version number not change, because there's not actual changes to that particular value add feature. It's just updating to support the underlying Jakarta technology. Again, using that transformer to update particular bundles within the product to pick which one is used, depending upon whether running in Jakarta 8 world or Jakarta 9 world, for instance. So once we get all those value add features or a subset of those value add features working, we may stage some of this to, we have Open Liberty and some of WebSphere Liberty working, from an application perspective. It may be staged instead of all of it, right? Because we may not need all of it in order to do initial GA. We do a very agile approach to our development and continuous delivery of the products. So that depends upon where the things come out from a schedule perspective. So I can't predict when this date will be that we will have a Jakarta EE9 released into a product. But again, when that happens, we will again run the TCK, certify a non-beta release with both Java 8 and Java 11. While this is all going on, we're also working with the Jakarta community to support newer Java levels in the TCK. Java 15, Java 16, Java 17 are being tested by IBM, by other vendors out there to see where we can get to hopefully having Java 17, the next long-term support version of Java, working with the TCK. Once Liberty works with Java 17, the TCK works with Java 17, we will look to also certify with Java 17 to give people the comfort level that, hey, you can still use Liberty with Java 17 with Jakarta EE9. Additionally, if you try to use existing microprofile features with Jakarta EE9, that will not work today. They have a very hard dependency on JAX-RS, CDI, and with the API changes, not the API, with the package changes from Java X to Jakarta, they will not be able to run. So even when we GA Jakarta EE9, you won't be able to use microprofile features with it until microprofile has a new version that supports Jakarta EE9, because right now microprofile 4 supports Jakarta EE8. The plan is to have a microprofile 5.0 sometime by end of year. Again, schedule is not fully known at this point. The hope is it will be sometime during fourth quarter. Obviously, we can't GA microprofile, make generally available in a release build of microprofile 4.0 until Jakarta is. So there's a prerequisite there. So once we get Jakarta E9 working fully and release that into a non-beta release, we can also do the same thing for microprofile 5.0. So I want to give you an idea of, well, how much work is it to have the value add features in Liberty work with Jakarta E9. This is the list of the value add features in Open Liberty that use Jakarta EE technologies that need to be transformed. I'd say maybe we're currently about 80-ish% of the implementations have been updated and the tests being updated in order to test Jakarta EE9. We run about a year's worth of test every week, on our code. So everything has to be run and be at good quality before we actually would release. So you have confidence that we didn't just do the transform and, well, it worked with EE8. It should work with EE9 because they did the transform. If we miss something in the transform rules, for instance, that would be bad, right? And you suddenly something would not work. And that's why we want to make sure that we are rerunning the tests in a Jakarta EE9 world. Again, we're using the transformer to transform the tests, to not have to rewrite the tests, to be able to test EE9. We don't want to duplicate the test code as well, not just the product code. And then from a WebSphere Liberty perspective, here's a list of what we're looking at needs to be updated from the features that are in WebSphere Liberty that depend upon Jakarta EE9 technologies. Obviously, there's a lot more value-add features than what are on these two slides. These are only the ones that we've identified that depend upon Jakarta EE9 or Jakarta EE technologies that need to be updated. Okay, so that takes care of presentation and me talking about a bunch of words. Let's actually try and do what I'm talking about, except for using an application. So starting out here, I did reference this blog post I've mentioned a couple times. This is the blog post on openliberty.io that shows you and tells you what we've done with the transformer and how to actually use it yourself. And I'll try and show you doing the same exact things that are talked about in here in a condensed fashion to be able to show you what we've done in Liberty and how you can do the same thing in your application world. So let's get started here from a Liberty perspective. Everything I'm going to do today, you can do yourself. I am not showing anything that is not available publicly in the open, using Open Liberty technologies and using an open application that is developed in the open. So let's start with, you would get, initially you go open to openliberty.io. Let me just go back here, and you know, front page here, get Open Liberty. And going down to the bottom here, go to the betas, right? Download the package. So I've already done this. I'm actually using 21.05 beta, but it's be the same with 21.07 beta. It's just I happen to have that in my system. In this particular example, I am showing you the download of the all beta features because I want to be able to run EE8 and EE9 within the same Liberty install. So just because we are supporting, we support Jakarta EE9 doesn't mean with the same install you can't run 7 and 8. Because the way that things are structured within Liberty, where you can turn on individual features, we actually will pull the appropriate code in order to run those particular features. Obviously, within the same server, you can't run EE8 and EE9, but with different servers, you could run with EE8 in one server and EE9 in this other server. Because of that, I'm using this all, which includes the GA features as well. Is it generally available features as well, not just the beta features. And then additionally, I just pulled down DayTrader. So I didn't want to use a simple little application that just does, you know, a hello world. I want to actually use some different technologies, you know, besides even web profile. This has full profile function, full platform function in it as well. So that you can see that it doesn't take a long time to transform even a little bit larger application. And you can save yourself a lot of time. So where did that go? This one. Need to get, no, it's not the one I want. Here it is again. Okay, so first and foremost, going to go down here. So preparing to run the transformer. I have done these steps already. I have unzipped my transformer jar here. You can see right here is the transformer jar. Here is the unzipped function. If you look in the libs directory, you see the jars that are talked about here, the dependent libraries. So I have already run that. So I want to have to take the time to do that. And then let us go over to Liberty here and I'll show you a little bit. I already have taken DayTrader 8. I have built DayTrader 8. I've copied the user server default server there. I just changed, instead of using a loose application, I changed it to use the ear and put it into the apps directory. Pretty easy there to be able to do a non-loose application. So, you know, this is what the server XML looks like. You can see here all EE8 features are listed here. We could do this same exact steps with EE7, and I'll talk about that a little bit when I talk about how to use the transformer to do this. Okay, so let us start up a server to run DayTrader 8. Okay, so DayTrader is started. Here's DayTrader. Reload the page. I'm going to just go look at trading portfolio. I'm going to log in. Let's get some quotes here. Hey, stocks are up, stocks are down. Shocking. take a look at market summary, just clicking through some different things here within the application, showing you, yep, things are loading as things are what you expected. So let me now stop. Okay, so now let's take a look at the transformer here. So in the transformer here, you need to usually provide some rules. So let me take you back over to the blog here. So, there are rules already built into the transformer, so you shouldn't have to do a whole bunch of rules. For the basic stuff, all those imports JavaX to Jakarta, those are taken care of already in the transformer if you're using the Jakarta transformer technology. Again, this transformer is generic. You could make rules to transform a lot of different things. It does not just have to be specific to Jakarta. But with this particular application, there are a couple things that are not currently handled in the transformer by default. So we're going to have some rules, additional rules that are going to be needed for the application. So let's first take a look at the direct properties. So the direct properties, that's the TD option they talk about here. So transform direct. So there are a couple strings within the code that could be with an actual string. So direct means it's a direct string that you need to do a replacement. It's not a code reference from an actual class. So that can also be in an annotation, for instance, right? Some of those are not currently transformed if that's the value is a string. So when you look through the application, you do some grepping in there, you look at the bytecode, hey, you can see that it has Q and it has topic, need to be transformed. And then, JSP properties, if you take a look at the JSP, there's an error.jsp in this application. It has some JavaX servlet functions in it, or servlet references in it, that need to be transformed to the Jakarta property name. So just like the code changed, the namespace changed, well, the property names also changed with Jakarta EE9. So you can also use the transformer to change those as well, where you have referenced in a JSP file, or could be within your application as well to do a get property, for instance, and passing it in a string. And then there is one other property here where we will look at the file.property. And so with that file.property, just as a generic file, so this is the -tf option that you see here. It actually says, hey, for this file type, these are the properties to use. So let's take a look at each one of those. I'm going to start from the bottom. I already looked. Okay, I already showed the JSP properties. That's how that one's referenced. I'm sorry, I looked at that too early. Then the web.xml. Again, there is some faces properties that are put in a web.xml usually. Again, those are JavaX in EE8, and those have been changed now to Jakarta in EE9. So the transformer doesn't necessarily know what a web.xml is. It knows what code is and the bytecode, and that's what it's going to do by default. And then there's the server.xml itself. So just like the application can be modified, you can also modify the server XML. So the first one up here is a javax.jms.topic. Well, just like I showed this earlier, there's the feature names here, but there's also references within server XML that references a JavaX. Those are also expected to be changed to Jakarta dot instead of JavaX dot. And need to be transformed in order to have them do it. Again, you can do this manually. We're trying to avoid the manual and allow you to be able to rapidly get this and spend more time actually doing real business updates to your applications. But additionally, like I said, all the feature names have changed. I don't know why this equal is here, but it shouldn't be. Where we have changed a version number, and it may have changed the same exact short name, or like we talked about, see if I can find it going here. EJB, for instance, 3.2 has changed to Enterprise Beans -4.0. So it can automatically do this for all your server XMLs to move over to Jakarta EE9. And so I just pulled that data in this, again, referencing here within this blog post, here's an example where I talked about where it has the javax.jms topic where it changed over to Jakarta. Right, it's already in there. We had the same example in the day trader configuration. And then here is the list of all your server configuration updates for the feature names that I mentioned. Right here, this is the example where it doesn't change the short name. And then there's a whole table where it does change. All I do is copy and paste these tables, put an equals in between each of these, and that's how I created that simple properties file to be able to do the transform. Okay, so let's go back up here so you can see the command line I'll be doing. So Java. Now let me see which Java I'm running. That's running Java 11. Java-jar or Eclipse. Yep, snapshot there. So the target location, this is where we want to be able to, what application are you trying to change? Or what configuration are you trying to change? So 2105 beta, like I mentioned. So P user servers default server. I'm actually going to give the entire server directory name. That in the apps directory, you will find DayTrader 8. In this directory, you'll also find server XML. It will identify the application. It will identify the server XML because I listed server XML. Here's the rules for it. And actually the transform. And I don't have to do multiple invocations of the transformer. I can just point to this one directory and it'll find the right things to do the transforming. And then we'll need an output location. So 5 beta, P user servers, default server. I'm going to call it default server 9. Just to say, hey, that's where I want my Jakarta E9 stuff. And then we'll have to reference those rules. So dash TD is the direct properties, dash TF is the file properties, And now we're going to try and transform DayTrader 8, transform it server.xml. It will take it from the default server directory and move it over to default server 9 directory, not modify default server. So you can still run both of them at the same time. And within seconds, it did its transformation. It gives you a bunch of information here at the end about what it did, how many things it changed, how many resources there were. You can easily see a bunch of work, again, within seconds. Well, did it work? Did it do what it was supposed to do? So let's take a look at that server.xml, except now in default server 9. Notice now all those feature names at the top now are the Jakarta EE9 feature names and the version numbers. So it didn't have to actually manually change it, screw up. Was it supposed to be 2.0? Was it supposed to be 3.0? You have the rules in there. It automatically does the right thing. Let's see, is there Java X in here? Well, no, there's not. But there's now a Jakarta.jms.topic. Well, let's see about running the default server 9 with the Jakarta E9 application now. Now, if that application didn't get updated, it's going to be not run because Jakarta E9 features or support does not support EE8 applications. It does not work any longer because of the namespace change. It is not backward compatible. So everything would blow up if it didn't transform the application. You would have a whole bunch of errors in server XML saying, I can't find Java X dot because it doesn't exist. So let's take a look now at DayTrader 8 again. Well, now I guess we should call it DayTrader 9 since it runs E9. So everything loaded up here. Let's do the same thing we did earlier. So let's log in. Let's get some quotes. And let's take a look at the market summary. Again, everything's now working within seconds, of running the transformer. I did not have to manually go change the application. I didn't even have to have the source code of my application in order to get it to run with Jakarta E9. So we think that a lot of customers can see a lot of benefit here, even if this is using outside of Liberty with any of the other Jakarta EE9 implementations. Customers can get the same exact benefit when running, trying to move over to Jakarta EE9 and be able to test rapidly, develop rapidly without having to do a bunch of work. Otherwise, that is most of my presentation.